Hello, old sport, and welcome back to A Rose Within the Thorns, where we prune the confusion around English so your understanding grows as you read. This is Season 3, Episode 3, focusing on The Great Gatsby. So far in our reading, Fitzgerald has shown us two different sides of the same world. Chapter 1 gave us beautiful homes, elegant dinners, and polite conversations, but underneath it felt tense and uncomfortable. Chapter 2 took us to the Valley of Ashes, the neglected space that sits between those wealthy places and supports them. Now in Chapter 3, we finally enter the place the novel has been building toward, Gatsby's house. Up to this point, Gatsby has almost been a rumour rather than a person. We have seen him from a distance and heard stories about him, but we haven't actually met him. And Fitzgerald delays meeting him again here. First, he wants to show us the party, because to understand Gatsby, we have to understand the world that he has created. So let's look at our summary. Nick receives a formal invitation to one of Gatsby's parties. This immediately sets him apart from the other guests, because most people simply arrive uninvited. Gatsby's mansion is treated almost like a public attraction, rather than a private home. When Nick arrives, he finds an enormous gathering. There's a full orchestra playing, tables are covered in food, alcohol is freely flowing. And crowds of strangers are moving through gardens, down by the beach, and the house. Yet, almost no one knows Gatsby. Guests talk constantly about him. Some say that he killed a man, others say that he was a German spy, others believe he inherited his fortune, or maybe he just studied at Oxford. No one seems to agree. Nick meets Jordan Baker and they decide to search for Gatsby, only for Nick to discover that he has already been talking to him. A polite man he had a calm conversation with turns out to be Gatsby himself. Gatsby is quiet, controlled, and attentive. He calls Nick old sport and speaks formally. He also does something unusual for a party host. He does not drink, and he spends much of the time watching rather than celebrating. Later, Gatsby asks Jordan to speak privately with him. She returns shocked, but refuses to reveal what he told her. As the party ends, guests leave chaotically. One car crashes into a ditch, and the people involved seem more confused than worried. Afterward, Nick reflects on his own life and begins spending more time with Jordan, despite knowing that she once cheated in a golf tournament. So Fitzgerald spends a long time here describing the party before introducing Gatsby, and this is deliberate. We hear music before we hear his voice, we see the crowd before we see him, we hear stories before we meet the person. The party itself kind of becomes this performance. People are not there because they know Gatsby, they're there because of what that party represents: excitement, status, and access to wealth. This is important. The party looks social, but it's not really social. Guests are not forming meaningful relationships. They're wandering, drinking, gossiping, and just speculating. Fitzgerald is showing a world where appearance replaces connection. The gathering is huge, yet it's strangely impersonal. We hear a couple of rumors about Gatsby. Maybe he killed a man, maybe he was a spy, maybe he went to Oxford. The point is not which rumor is true. The point is that Gatsby exists in people's minds as a story before he exists as a person. He's famous without being known. Fitzgerald is exploring how reputation works. Society creates identities for people based on assumptions, wealth, and spectacle. Gatsby becomes a myth that is constructed by others. This also links to the novel's larger concern with perception and reality. What people believe about Gatsby becomes more powerful than who he actually is. So when Nick finally meets Gatsby, the introduction is almost quiet. There's no grand entrance, there's no announcement. Gatsby is polite, attentive, and almost careful in his behavior. He smiles frequently, speaks formally, and he calls people old sport. This is important because the host does not match the party. The party is chaotic and excessive. but Gatsby is controlled and deliberate. This contrast suggests that the party is not simply for enjoyment. It may be serving another purpose. Gatsby stands slightly apart from the crowd, even while hosting it. Just like in Chapter 1, he's surrounded by people, yet he's still separate. Nick notices something else. Gatsby watches the guests. He is less a participant and more an observer of the world that he has created. So Gatsby later asks Jordan Baker to speak privately with him, and she returns visibly surprised and says that she's learned something remarkable but does not reveal it yet. At the same time, Nick's relationship with Jordan is developing. We learn that Jordan once cheated in a golf tournament, or maybe she didn't. Nick knows this, but he continues to see her, and this matters for understanding Nick. Nick believes himself to be honest and morally steady, but he becomes comfortable around dishonesty and moral uncertainty. He observes questionable behavior while slowly adjusting to it. Fitzgerald is showing us here that environment influences values. Nick is beginning to change simply by living in this world. So as the party ends, guests leave in disorder. A car crashes into a ditch and the passengers react with confusion rather than concern. This ending is humorous, but it's also important. The party promises glamour, but it ends with carelessness and disorientation. Fitzgerald suggests that excess does not create happiness or clarity. Instead, it produces distraction. The excitement fades, but nothing meaningful remains. So I just want to talk a little bit about Gatsby's character. So before meeting Gatsby, we know him through rumors. After meeting him, we know him through behavior, and those two images don't match. He's not loud, he's not arrogant, and he's not reckless. He's polite and almost hopeful. Nick even notices Gatsby's smile, describing it as reassuring and sincere. This is one of the first moments that Gatsby feels human rather than mythical. Yet some detail, just feels slightly unnatural. His speech sounds practiced. His phrase, old sport, sounds rehearsed. This raises a question. Is Gatsby simply being himself, or is Gatsby carefully pretending to be a version of himself that he wants others to see? This chapter introduces another one of those key ideas of the novel, that identity can be constructed. So by the end of chapter 3, we've finally met Gatsby. But instead of solving the mystery, Fitzgerald deepens it. The rumors created one person, the real interaction creates another. Gatsby has wealth, attention, and a crowd around him, yet he remains distant and watchful. So the important question is no longer just who Gatsby is, it's why he's built this world full of people while still standing apart from them. So next episode we'll begin learning about Gatsby's past and his connection to Nick, and the novel starts moving from mystery towards explanation. Until then, keep reading slowly and notice how often characters are not just living their lives, but performing them. This has been A Rose Within the Thorns, where we prune away the confusion so knowledge can grow.